Good evening, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for coming to today's sharing, which is reviewing Bhante Punnaji's teachings, specifically the Paticca Samuppada, which he now calls Concurrence of Logical Antecedence. This is the second part. Last week we did the first part where we talked about the the building up of the cognitive process, and now in the second part we will look at the affective process. In the diagram, basically this is the diagram we're going to follow with a little bit of notes on that side. I have updated slightly the diagram, so those of you who have last week's diagram, there are just a few words that have changed, but they are at a very important position. They were overlooked in previous updates. Very quickly, we all know that Bhante has always taught us that there are two activities going on in the mind, and the Buddha used three words to describe the mind. The first one is basically very much the activity of the body, that is vijnana, picking up activities from the environment, stimulating sense organs, and therefore we have a perception of what we have seen, heard, smelled, tasted, and touched. Then there is the mano, which interprets it in a categorized manner, and then there is the Cheetah, which then reacts to whether the feeling is pleasant or unpleasant, as well as the clinging on to every experience. Very quickly, we spoke about this awakening. There are two ways of awakening, and the first one is called Ubhatobhāgavimutti, awakening through insight. This is accomplished by following the Eightfold Way and then going through the four jhanas, and from there one can practice insight meditation, or what most people call vipassana, but Bhante likes to call it vidassana. And he basically points out that the proper practice of vidassana is to practice the Satta Bojjhanga, the 8 steps to awakening. And that would lead you to awaken through insight. That means through knowledge, through knowing, right? Direct knowledge of the ultimate truth or the ultimate knowledge. So this is Ubhatobhāgavimutti. Vimutti simply means liberation, emancipation, and basically that's the main meaning, to be liberated from suffering. So Panya means insight or wisdom, ultimate wisdom in this case. So awakening through insight into the true realities of life, and that is Ubhatobhāgavimutti. There is a second way to accomplish awakening, which actually was the way that the Buddha used. But he didn't teach that because it's a very difficult way, it's the hard way to do it. That is, having accomplished the 4 jhanas, then one goes into the ayatanas. The ayatanas is that actually what a lot of people mistakenly call, either they call the arupa jhanas or they call the 5th, 6th, 7th or 8th jhana, but they are not jhanas. Because jhana is not the same thing as ayatanas. Jhana is basically, we have two minds conflicting with each other, the mano and the chitta. Jhana is basically taming the chitta, bringing the chitta to a state of stillness so that it is working together with mano, and that process brings it to what is called a unification of the mind. So the two minds become one. When they become one, you can call it mano, you can call it chitta, it doesn't matter, it is one mind, no longer conflicting. It is quite commonly called Cheetah. A lot of people use Cheetah to refer to the unified mind. It doesn't matter, but basically there are no more two minds. It's just one mind. It is basically has unified. And that unification process is called ekagata. So basically this is jhana. Jhana is to unify the two minds by reducing the emotional one, the one that is disturbing, that is shaking and causing a lot of disturbances, defilements, and so on. The ayatanas is a different thing. The ayatana is actually stopping the mind, step by step, stopping it in stages. So when one has completed the jhanas, unifying the mind, now begin to stop it and bring it to a state of complete absolute stopping. So there are 4 stages before it is completely stopped. And these 4 stages are called the ayatanas. When it is finally completely stopped, it is called Sanna Vedayita Nirodha. And then there is no mind, no activity. The only thing that's going on is metabolism in the body and temperature in the body. Those are the only 2 things present. There is no mind. So the body is still kept warm because otherwise it will be a dead body. So the difference between that state and a dead body is that there is temperature in the body because there is metabolism going on. And that metabolism is continuously keeping the body alive. If that metabolism stops, then that body is dead. That whoever has stopped the mind will not come out of it. And this has happened to some people actually. I think there have been cases where you see some monks go into deep meditation, reach a point where they never wake up from it, and that's it, they die in that spot. That could be the state, nobody really knows, but that is possible, that a person entered that, stopped the mind, and never came out of it. BHANTE and also many commentaries have mentioned that in that state you can only last 7 days. Whoever has stopped the mind, if he doesn't wake up from that within 7 days, he's dead. Right? He's a goner. And that waking up is actually because Sanya and Vedana kick-started again. The Panchakanda kick-started it, and then the mind started all over again. It's like kick-starting a car. You know, in the old days, not nowadays. In ancient times, talking about 30 years ago, cars, when they are stalled, they can't start. I remember when I was a little kid, we used to have a metal bar stick inside and crank and get started the car. And that's really what happens there. The brain got kick-started and came out of it. And when one comes out of it, that person has become enlightened. Because as that person wakes up from it, he begins to see the whole process of Paticca Samuppada happening right in his mind. Step by step, it is happening. And that's what we're going to be discussing. How Paticca Samuppada is happening from a state where it is where the mind has completely stopped. BHANTE calls that state insentience. Insentience, as I pointed out, a lot of people translate the word insentience simply to mean no feeling. But actually, BHANTE used that word not from conventional usage. So if you go to ordinary dictionary, it will not give you the correct meaning of what BHANTE meant as insentience. You need to go to philosophy dictionary. That means if you go to dictionary used by people who study philosophy, because in every discipline there is a dictionary, especially for that discipline. You have engineering dictionary, you have medical dictionary, then you have philosophers dictionary, and if you go there and you look at the word insentience, it says, sorry, there's no insentience, there's sentience. Sentience means presence of sensation. Insentience is the opposite. So what is the opposite of presence of sensation? The opposite is absence of sensation. No sensation, no feeling. And that's what it is. So waking up from there, one begins to witness the arising of Paticca Samuppada step by step, starting from a state of avijja, which BHANTE says is insentience. And that's really what happens. That is actually the process of creation. Creating what? Creating the mind. The mind is created from there. And from that creation of the mind, we begin to create concepts of the world, concept of the self, eventually leading to all kinds of suffering. So that is really what we're looking at. The absolute stopping of the mind, and then waking up from there, witnessing the process of creation, and this is called the concurrence of logical antecedents. So the Paticca Samuppada is actually describing how the mind created from a state of no mind, from a state of completely stopping. So in summary, graphically, there are 2 ways to become awakened. The first way is completing the 4 jhanas, practicing the Satta Bojjhanga, and becoming awakened from there. And this is called Punnaji Vimutti, awakening through insight. The second way is the harder way, which is what the Buddha has discovered, and a couple of his closest disciples followed this way. Moggalianas is one of them, and some people say even Sariputta is another one that became awakened through this way. Completing the 4 jhanas, then going through the ayatana to stop the mind. Stop the process of stopping the mind through the ayatanas, and before the mind is completely stopped, this process according to Bhante, in page 54 of level 3 book, this one, on page 54, Bhante has explained that the person would have attained what is called Ceto Vimutti. But Ceto Vimutti is not necessarily enlightenment, which means a person who has reached that stage, he is actually going through stopping of the mind, but he may not have cultivated the insight of the true realities of life, right? Because that insight can only be cultivated through Sattva or witnessing the Paticca Samuppada. So there are two practices that can help one to cultivate that insight, and that is either through Sattva or waking up from stopping the mind, one witnesses the arising of Paticca Samuppada. So when the mind is finally stopped, and this person then has the potential of becoming enlightened, provided he wakes up within 7 days. So when he wakes up within 7 days, then he will witness the arising of Paticca Samuppada, starting from a state where the mind has stopped, which is avijja. Last week we already covered half of it, so this week I will run through for the benefit of those who did not attend last week. How many of you did not come last week? Can I see a show of hands? Yeah, okay, so for your benefit, I will run through very quickly what was covered last week so that you catch up with it, because there are really 2 processes where the mind wakes up to it. The first one is the cognitive process, and then the affective process. Very importantly, when I say and then, because I'm not referring to timing. We discussed already, it is logical antecedents. Conditions give rise to an outcome, not timing. That means this is not like this is happening now and then next moment this other thing happened. It is not like that. As long as the conditions are there, immediately it will happen. There is no time difference, so we're not talking about timing. So when the conditions are right, the mind will kickstart, and when the mind kickstarts, then the cognitive process arises. When the conditions are right, the affective process arises, and that's really what is going on there. So this is what is called double awakening. Double awakening is referring to both cultivating that insight, and in this case, the insight is gained by observing the arising of Paticca Samuppada. And the other awakening is the fact that you have already stopped the mind. Basically, the process has stopped. So it's both insight and also stopping the mind. So the development of Samadhi. Samadhi is basically referring to the state where the mind is perfectly stilled, and there are 2 processes of stilling it. First is stilling the affective process. So in our normal environment, we are living in the sensual realm, sensual world, karma bhava or karma loka. We are living in the sensual realm because our sense organs are working. We are sensing the environment through our sense organ. So this is called the sensual world. And this is what's happening to us right now, here and now. In this state, we then begin to meditate, and then we begin to eliminate the 5 hindrances. And 5 hindrances can be eliminated on a temporary basis, or it can be eliminated permanently. When you eliminate 5 hindrances on a temporary basis, you will experience the first jhana on a temporary basis. But once you get out of it, your 5 hindrances come back again, then you're back to square one. So basically eliminating the 5 hindrances either temporarily or permanently, and then at the same time cultivating and then developing the 5 constituents of jhanas, or 5 constituents of ecstasy. So then these are the 5 jhanangas, and then one will experience the 4 jhanas. The 4 jhanas is actually when the mind enters into the next realm, and that is the rupa bhava, the imagery realm, or some people call the form realm. Form is a reasonable word if you think of form in terms of maybe some outline, there is an image, there is an outline, there is colors and things like that. And then the word form is okay. But some people translate form to mean matter, and that is not correct. Because how can it be a material realm? Because you no longer have senses, you can't sense the matter. So the word rupa has very often, in fact almost in all cases, incorrectly translated as matter. This is not matter, this is image, imagery realm. There are images. So the mind is still working with images. And then the mind can go into those 4 ecstasies, 4 jhanas. And taking it one step further to stop the cognitive process, because in this rupa bhava, you have basically stopped the affective process, the 4 jhanas, stopping the chitta. And the chitta and mano become one. Now with the chitta mano become one, there is only one mind, no longer 2 different minds. Then in the imageless realm, arupa bhava, you then experience the ayatanas. As you can see, they are ayatanas, they are not jhanas. So you can see the names, all 4 of them. The names are ayatanas, that's really what it is. 4 ayatanas. But a lot of people, maybe for convenience sake or whatever, call it arupa jhana. They call it the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th jhana. But if a teacher who is trying to teach this correctly should not be calling this jhana, because it is not jhana, it's ayatanas. Bhante has pointed out, this is not jhana. Jhana simply means standing out of the emotions. By this time, your mind has no more emotions, so there's nothing to stand out of anymore. Right? And then finally, the mind cycles through these 4 stages of ayatana, reaching a state where the mind is completely stopped. Absolutely stopped. No activity in the mind. And basically, cessation of sensation and feeling. And that is Sanna Vedayita Nirodha. In that state, something has to happen to kickstart the brain so that the mind starts again. And basically, it is the Panchakanda. As we know, these are the 5 constituents of the process of perception. It is Sanya and Vedana basically kickstarting the whole thing. So, in other words, when one has meditated and reached that stage, the Buddha did that. He reached that state. On the night of his enlightenment, he finally attained that. He reached there, the mind stopped. I don't know how many nights it had stopped. I mean, there's no description whether it was 1 night, 2 nights, 3 nights, or 4 nights, but a lot of people think it was just 1 night. But actually, it may be 1 night, it may be a few nights, nobody really knows. Right? The mind had stopped, state of insentience, then something kick-started the Panchakanda. So with Sanya Vedana, they started the process of construction of the mind. The mind began, kick-started. And that kick-starting basically means the mind starts to construct sankhara, mental construction. So the first thing that happened is mental construction of sensory entities visualized. That means something triggered, kick-started the Sanya Vedana, so that sankhara started. And with sankhara, then it started to produce the perception of something that has been experienced, an object that was experienced through the senses, one of the 5 senses at least. So the process the process of perception has produced a perception. This is perception of constructed object. This object is in the mind, it's constructed in the mind, constructed entity. And of course, with that, mental image arises, rupa. And with that, the mind begins to interpret what it is by giving it a name, calling it something. So when you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch anything, you give it a name. Right? When you see this, you call it a mouse. Calling it a mouse is giving it a name. That is nama. Seeing this is to see the rupa of the mouse, the mental image of the mouse, and you call it a mouse, giving it a name, nama. So the nama rupa arises, basically the constructed entity and categorized identity. So nama is like identifying something, the identity. Right? So let's hear Bhante say, explain this one more time. From sensation to perception, we begin to make use of these 6 sensory fields in order to experience the object and start to create an object exists. Now in the mind there is an object, and an object arises.
What we have perceived is simply an object which comes in the form of an image and a name for it. An image and a name for it. Then, once that image has been made and the name, we say Vijnana Pacchaya Nama Rupam. Nama means the name, Rupa means that mental image. Then we talk about Nama Rupa Pacchaya Salayatana. Now, Salayatana means we are not only looking with our eyes, we are also hearing with our ears and smelling with our nose. We are also tasting with our tongue, and we are also touching with our body. This is why you give something to a small child, that child will want to put it in the mouth and touch in various ways, get all the impressions. So that is why all those things are put together to form an object. So it is not only the eye that we are using. When I look at this bottle here, I see it as a bottle, but I know that if I touch the bottle, this is how I'll feel it. Even if I have never touched it, I still know when I touch it, I'll feel it like this. That is because I am using my memory. I have touched bottles before. So you see, because we have using all the 5 senses, we put together all that to form an object.
So when Bhante says form an object, he meant creating what in the mind is perceived as having experienced the object itself. And that object can be something like food. Food is one thing you experience with almost all your 5 senses, almost every time. You see the food, you get excited. You smell it, ooh, then your sensual pleasures arises. Then you begin to taste it, and then you begin to feel the texture, and you can taste it. And then in some cases, like for example, you're eating very crunchy biscuits, you can hear the sound, crackling sound. So you're actually using all your 5 senses to experience food. And then you say, this is very tasty. If you take away 4 of the 5 senses and experience food with only 1 of the senses, it may not be half as tasty as you think it is. So basically, we experience things from the environment through all our 5 senses, and then the 6th sense, the mano, puts it all together by first trying to recognize what it is. So this is the first thing that the mano does, that it tries to recognize through memory of categorized past. That means you remember things according to category. And then what it does is then the mano becomes aware and conscious. Now this word vijnana has often been translated as consciousness. Bhante has pointed out, vijnana is not consciousness as far as the five physical senses are concerned. It is basically perception. So perception is referring to the five physical senses, what was perceived through the senses, and basically it is what is perceived through your sense organs, five of them. And mano is the part where it is conscious. There is an awareness of that object, what it is. Because if you depend on one sense alone, that sense alone cannot be aware of what that object is. We are aware of an object, consciously aware of an object when all the senses work together and tell us a story about the object. So basically, this is how it works. That word vijnana means consciousness in the case of mano, but in the case of the other five senses, it means perception. So Bhante has provided this list where he pointed out the five vijnanas are perception, and then the sixth one, which is the mano vijnana, that is conception, cognition, and intellect, and consciousness. A few words you can use to describe it. There is not one word that can accurately describe mano vijnana. So you could say, you can combine these words and then you can understand what it is really all about. Cognition, categorization, conception, consciousness, intellect. These are all the different words describing the different aspects of how mano vijnana works. So basically the Paticca Samuppada, after the construction and the arising of the perception and the image in the mind, we give it a label, then we begin to apply all the senses together to try to understand what that object is. Because we usually use all the senses to try to understand what we are experiencing. And from there, we begin to produce the cognition, the awareness of what that object is. And this is phassa. Phassa, Bhante translated as cognition. But here, the word cognition means a deeper level of cognition. It is not just cognizing an object, but cognizing the object relevant to its environment. That means context-based. So here, every object is then perceived as something out there, and that is out there in the world. So we begin to have this concept, there is a world out there. I see something out there. I saw the dog out there. Right? I knocked my hand against the wall is out there. So all the things we experience out there, and that becomes the objective world, objective experience. Creating this objective experience is phassa, but they calls it cognition. Becoming conscious of the objective experience, leading to the concept of the existence of a world out there, somewhere out there. Objective experience is out there. This is the first awareness. We become aware of an object out there. And this completes the cognitive process. So up to this point, the cognitive process is now fully working. So let's hear what Bhante has to say about the next step. So this phassa is creating the concept of an objective world. And here Bhante keeps using the term forming an object. When he says forming an object, he's really referring to a comprehensive version of the object, not just specifically what you see, but relevant to its environment. So that's why he's creating an objective world out there. And this is the beginning of the mind becoming broken into two parts of what is out there, what is in here. So this phassa is first creating what is out there. Phassa means becoming conscious of the objective experience or the objective world.
So you see, because we have using all the five senses, we put together all that to form an object. That forming an object is what is called phassa. Salayatana pacca phasso. Phassa means the formation of an object. Today the word phassa is translated as contact. Phassa is not contact. Phassa is the formation of an object. The object is formed by making use of all the five senses, not just one sense. So that complete object is formed. That is phassa.
Bhante pointed out the word phassa, which is commonly translated as contact, is incorrect. Now, I'm not trying to defend the translation. I fully agree with Bhante in that sense. But one thing about the way Bhante translates words is very precise and very black and white. So in this case, when he talks about contact, he basically refers to the meaning of the word contact to mean in a physical way. Now, if you think of it like that, then it's not correct. Contact is not the right word. For example, you see a dog out there. So, do you have contact with the dog? Did the dog enter your eye? No. Light reflected from the dog entered your eye. So, you had no contact with the dog. So, in that sense, contact is wrong. But if you think of contact in a conceptual way, you had a conceptual contact with that object, then there is some basis for that word contact. I'm not trying to defend that word, but if you think of it in an existential way, then it's wrong. And this is also an important lesson we must all learn. Very importantly, the Buddha's teaching is experiential. The Buddha's teaching is not existential. In the same way, Bhante's translations and Bhante's explanations are always experiential, never existential. So therefore, using the word contact in an existential way, that is not correct. But if you think of contact in an experiential way, then contact is a reasonable word, but it's not accurate enough. Because Bhante's explanation there is becoming conscious of the objective experience. I don't know what is one word that can translate phassa, but the meaning is very clear there, very precise. That's why Bhante did not offer a single word. He tried to use the word cognition, but here it means a higher level of cognition. Because when you talk about cognition, you can talk about different levels. In the same manner, when you talk about consciousness, you can also talk about different levels. Being aware of something is a level of consciousness. But being aware of something, what it can do, how it can evolve in the future, that is a higher level of consciousness. So therefore, every word has a lot of meanings behind it. So cognition here, when Bhante calls it cognition, he means a deeper level of cognition, a richer level of cognition. Now you begin to be aware of this object relative to its environment, therefore it's an objective experience out there. So when we see a dog, we have no contact with the dog. Light is reflected from the dog. It then enters the eye, and then the process of perception gives rise to a perception and a mental image of the dog, and then you become aware you have seen a dog, and that is the basic experience of seeing. So in the process of seeing, there is only the seeing. But unfortunately, the mind likes to go beyond that. The mind is restless. The mind doesn't stop there. The mind doesn't say, okay, I have seen the dog, that's it. No. The mind begins to project, oh, there is a dog out there. So that projection is creating the concept of something out there, the objective world. So what it has created is now an objective world out there. Right? So projecting, having seen the dog out there, that's why you begin to have this, you begin to create this objective world. At the same time, whatever has arisen in the mind comes with it a certain feeling, whether it makes you feel good or it doesn't make you feel good. So there is a certain feeling and you begin to react to that feeling. So let's listen to Bhante talk about this reaction to the feeling. Pleasant or unpleasant feeling of the objective experience leads to an emotional reaction to the objective experience.
Once the object is formed, we are going to make use of the feeling in the object. You may get a pleasant feeling in the object, or you may get an unpleasant feeling in the object. And the moment you get the feeling, you react to that object with a desire or hatred. You see, it's an emotional reaction to the object. That emotional reaction the Buddha called tanha. Tanha is not craving. Today, Rice Davids use the word craving. But tanha is not craving. Tanha is the emotional reaction. A craving is wanting something. But here we not only wanting, if we dislike something, we don't want it. We want to get rid of it. So therefore it is not a craving, it is the emotional reaction.
So basically Pandit pointed out, once we become aware of the objective experience, there is a feeling associated with it, pleasant or unpleasant, that makes us like it or don't like it. So this feeling of pleasant or unpleasant leads us to whether we like it or don't like it. So that is Vedana. Vedana towards the objective experience, and therefore this is the feeling, feeling pleasant, unpleasant or neutral. So here I have added the notes, pleasant, unpleasant or neutral of the objective experience. And this is the beginning of the affective process, the Cheetah. This is where Cheetah starts to, Cheetah arises. The conditions are present for the Cheetah to arise. What conditions are present? The awareness of an objective experience, and then the feeling of the objective experience, then the Cheetah arises. So that was where we stopped last week. So last week we came up to this point, and now we are moving on from this point onwards. So now I'll give you a flow chart of how it looks like. Activities in the environment stimulate our five senses. Panchakanda arises. And with the arising of Panchakanda, the Sanya and Vedana will kickstart the mind. Sanya and Vedana will kickstart the mind. So, and produce a perception. And we're able to see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. Sanya kickstarts the cognitive process to interpret what we have seen. And therefore what we have seen is really arising in the form of a mental image in the mind, Rupa. With the arising of the Rupa, we begin to interpret it by comparing it with past experiences. That process is called papancha. And that is comparing it with categorized memory of the past and then giving it a meaning. So this process is recognition. That means trying to recognize what that object is. Once the object is recognized, we begin to create an idea and give it a name, labeling it, identifying it, right? Interpreting it, and this is conception. So Mano actually is responsible for two things: cognition or recognition and conception. Conception means creating a story, giving it meaning, not just knowing what it is, but giving it meaning. Calling it a dog, now you've seen the dog. So the concept of an entity called a dog out there. So now the experience has become richer. It is not pure anymore. It has now a lot of things added onto it. The add-on is out there. That has been created. So the objective world has been created. At the same time, with this experience of having perceived this object and interpreted what it is, there is a feeling associated with it, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, and that's when the affective process kickstarts. So the affective process arises because the conditions are there. The conditions is that there is vijnana, and now you have rupa, and then you have nama. So nama, rupa, and at the same time there's vedana, and now the affective process starts. Chitta is started. And with chitta starting, you begin to like or dislike the experience. And this actually comes from your memory. Your memory, imagination, expectation. These are the three things. Imagination, memory, expectation basically determine whether you like something or you don't like something. So there are three types of tanha. This reaction is tanha. There are three types of tanha. With each type there is an actual reaction that goes with it. The first type of tanha is called karma tanha. The word karma here is not talking about your karma as in what you do, no. This word karma means sensual. So this is really your reaction to the sensory experience, sensual, whether it is pleasant, right? In this case, it actually means pleasure. It is pleasant. So you're reacting to pleasant feelings. You also, and this reaction is called lobha. Lobha is lust and greed for pleasures, right? This reaction is called lobha because now you first, if it is something pleasant, you want it. Wanting it is called lust. Once you get what you want, we don't normally stop there. You know, our mind is very greedy. Once we get what we want more. So lust can lead to greed if you don't tame your lust. That means once you start to enjoy something, you want more of it. If you're a durian lover and your neighbor invites you next door to have a durian and he starts opening Musang King one by one, after eating the first 2 seeds, will you stop? Or will you just keep going as long as it keeps opening, you keep going? See? Greed arises after lust. You begin with lust, it becomes greed. Now the next feeling is unpleasant, let's say. It's an unpleasant feeling. So you begin to react to unpleasant feelings, and this is called vibhava tanha. Vibhava comes from 2 root words. Vibhava. V here means stopping or voiding, right? Negating. Bhava here means existence in this sense, becoming. So here, you want it to stop because it's something unpleasant. You want it to stop, you don't want it. You want to push it away, you want to stop it. That's why it's called vibhava tanha, the reaction to stop something. Right? And that reaction is dosa. Begin with aversion. Aversion means you want to avoid it. You don't want it, you want to get away from it. You either push it away or you want to get away from it. But aversion can turn to hatred if aversion does not work. And that means if you keep trying to avoid something and it keeps coming at you, sooner or later you hate it, you know. You have a next door, you have someone sitting next to you who just won't stop talking, yep, and you tell that person not to talk and that person keeps talking, sooner or later you begin to hate that experience. So that is vibhava tanha leading to dosa. At this stage, you now are aware you have a reaction. And that awareness of reaction leads you to realize that you are reacting to it. And then you begin to react to this subjective experience, because the reaction is a subjective experience. And this subjective experience, basically, the nature of the subjective experience is neutral. It is your reaction which is not neutral. So, with this subjective experience, you become aware you have a subjective experience, you begin to react to it, and that's when you create moha. Moha is the delusion of a self-centered existence. I like it, I don't like it. You see, when you react to something, you don't say, oh, this thing is unpleasant. It should not be liked. You don't think like that. You think, this thing is unpleasant. I don't like it. You see, the I arises, and this is the delusion of a self-centered existence. The I, me, or mine arises because you now cling on to your reaction itself. And that leads to the moha, which is delusion of a self-centered existence. Moha is commonly translated as delusion or even ignorance. Delusion, yes. Ignorance, not really. Right? So it's more a delusion of a self-centered existence by clinging on to your reaction and say, I am reacting. It is I who doesn't like this object. Right? So that is really what happens. So with Vedana, which is the feeling of this objective experience, and the emotional reaction begins, reacting to this feeling of the objective experience. And as I pointed out, there are three types of tanha: kama tanha, bhava tanha, and vibhava tanha. So with these first two types, it is the two extremes. You either like it or you don't like it. At the same time, you become aware that you have a reaction. Now you begin to cling on to that reaction. So at that same time, upadana arises, and you now cling on to your reaction. This is personalizing the reaction of the subjective experience. This reaction, you begin to create the notion this is a subjective experience. There is an object up there. I don't like it. That I is the subjective experience. And therefore that leads to leads to bhava tanha, right? Existence. Self-centered existence. So upadana is personalizing the subjective experience in your reaction. Actually, upadana is personalizing a very complete set of things, not just one thing. Right? It's not just only whether you like or don't like the object, it's a combination. Firstly, personalizing the experience that you have seen something. I see the dog. So that's the first thing that is personalized. At the same time, you also personalize the feeling. Oh, this is a nice dog. So now you are personalizing the Vedana. And then the third thing you are personalizing is your own personal reaction, tanha. Oh, I want this dog, I want to have this dog. Or, I don't like this dog, I want to kick that dog, you know. So, you're personalizing your reaction. And therefore, you begin to react in that emotional way. Emotional reaction to feelings of the objective experience leads to personalizing the reaction as mine. Because when you say, I don't, you feel you don't like something, so that feeling is mine. Right? The reaction is mine. No, that is what has become a subjective experience. And personalizing this subjective experience creates a notion of an I. When you say, this reaction is mine, then you are saying there must be an I behind the mind. So the I, me, and mine arises. And therefore you begin to create the notion that a self exists. It is the self that is experiencing the object. That is what arises in the mind. Oh, there is a self. There is a me that is experiencing that thing out there. Right?
Now the moment the emotional reaction occurs, another interesting thing happens. You see, we first formed an object out there. Once the object is there, you begin to react to that object emotionally. Then there are two things, the object and the reaction. Earlier there was no reaction, but now there is a reaction. The moment the reaction comes up, the object is out there, the reaction is inside here. And what is inside? What do we do to what is inside? We say, this reaction is mine, is my reaction. The moment we say this reaction is mine, that is called personalizing the reaction. That is the meaning of the word upadana. Rice Davids used the word grasping or clinging. This is not grasping or clinging, it is calling that mine. That means personalizing. So the moment it is personalized, what happens? How can there be something mine if there is no I? The moment you say this is mine, you have created the I. I comes into being. That I coming into being is called bhava. The word bhava means coming into existence. The I have come into existence. Earlier there was no I here. There was only an object. The moment a desire or a hatred came, mind came, and with the mind came the I. You understood? So the I comes into being by personalizing.
Personalizing is upadana, right? And two key words, upadana. Dana basically is to take. To give, right? Actually upa adana. It's not upadana. I beg your pardon. It is upa adana. Adana means to take. Dana is to give. As we all know, we attend dana. We give. That is dana. But here it is upa adana. A in front, the A in front of the dana means to take. Upa is within, inside. So upa adana means to take it inside. That is personalizing, bringing it in. I now call this mine, personalizing it. So the word upa adana means personalizing that experience, right? And that is upa adana. Now let's look at it graphically. As we experience the object, a mental image arises, and then we have an experience of having seen something. So in the experience of seeing, there is only the seeing, and that's all that has happened so far. But the mind is a clinging mind, is a personalizing mind. Everything we personalize. So we begin to then see that thing out there, and we start to create the concept. There is a world out there, right? So we begin to break this experience into two parts. Dichotomy of experience. What are the two parts? First part is the object that we have experienced, is the objective world out there. But the next part is that now we feel something about it. We react to it. There is something inside here reacting. So there is the subjective part, which is now the self. Right? The self has been created because of this personalizing this reaction and personalizing the reaction to the objective experience. So with reaction and personalizing, we begin to create the idea that we exist. And this is created because we now have this notion that there is an I, because this reaction is mine, then there must be an I. And this idea of a self arises, imaginary self arises. But what do we call the self? So we need to look for something that we can call the self. So the mind now creates the idea that the self exists. And then the mind tries to find something that exists. And the body is the only thing. So therefore it begins to personalize this body as I, me, or mine. And that basically completes the affective process. Now this clinging on to the body, I'm going to explain this deeper in a moment, because with the notes so far, it is not enough to explain how we cling on to this body as I, me, or mine. I'm going to show you some psychology experiments where you can see it's easy for the mind to start to cling on to this body as though this body is I, me, or mine. Right? So, with the concept of this self arising, we look for something that we can say is I. But we cannot say this thought in the mind is I, because this thought is intangible. It arises and disappears, arises and disappears. We want something stable, something we can physically hold on to, and the body is the only thing. Right? So the body seems to exist, and therefore we refer to the body as the self that exists because it occupies space and time.
So the moment the I has come into being, another question arises. What did you call the I? Where is the I? The I is only just a concept, but what are you referring to as I? There must be an object to call the I, to refer to the I. What is the object? The I has to exist. How can the I exist? What is the meaning of existence? Existence has to be understood. Existence means, now if you say this cup exists, what does it mean? The cup occupies space, it occupies time. To exist is to occupy space and time. So what is the I that is occupying space and time? The only I that can be occupying space and time is the body. So the body becomes the I. Body is the thing that is occupying space and time. When the body begins to occupy space and time, you can say the body is so many inches tall, so many fat, and all kinds of things you can talk about the body, you see. that is occupying space, the volume of the body, length, breadth and height. So, but occupying time means it has a past, a present and future. To occupy time is to have a past, a present and a future. Now the I is not only just I, but the I has been identified as the body. The body has become the I. So the body has become the self. The body has become the self.
So when the body becomes the self, the mind now is aware there is a self, or the mind thinks there is a self. When self comes to mind, when the mind begins to think there is a self, then that condition is called Sakkaya Ditthi. Right? Sakkaya Ditthi comes from three key words. Sak means to take ownership, and Kaya basically is the body, talking about the body. Ditthi is point of view, perspective. Right? So thinking that the body, that I own this body is mine, I own this body, that is Sakkaya Ditthi. Some people, of course, translate the word Sakkaya Ditthi beyond that in a conceptual way. So you can also say there is a conceptual element to this personality perspective. That's also another way this word Sakkaya Ditthi is translated. But simply put, the simple explanation of Sakkaya Ditthi is Sak means to take ownership, Kaya is the body, and Ditthi is the point of view. And to think that this body, I own this body. This is me. Now I'm going to show you a very interesting clip from a neuroscientist by the name of Antonio Damasio. I'm a big fan of him because he's doing a lot of research in the University of Southern California, USC. And in fact, he and his wife are both top neuroscientists. He is the one who takes the study of brain studies and try to interpret and explain how it affects the mind, and he's an expert in explaining brain activity connected with emotions. And his wife, Hannah Damasio, is an expert in MRI technology. She scans the brains and interprets what has been scanned. So, and he takes that interpretation and explains how it connects with our psychology. So, Professor Antonio Damasio, he's the professor of neuroscience, psychology, and philosophy. Amazing, three things. He's the professor of three things: neuroscience, which is the study of brain science; psychology, which is the study of the mind, the thinking, the way we think; and then philosophy, the way we philosophize at the University of Southern California. How self comes to mind. He's written a book. If you really want to learn more about emotions and how the brain works as far as emotions is concerned, you can Google him, and he's got a few books out. And one of them is called How Self Comes to Mind. Here is a short clip taken from one of the TED Talks he gave, and from there I extracted only a part of it, which explains very precisely how this idea of a self arises in the mind from the scientific perspective.
What is consciousness? What is a conscious mind? Well, first of all, it is a mind which is a flow of mental images. And of course, consider images that can be sensory patterns, visual, such as you're having right now in relation to the stage and me, or auditory images as you're having now in relation to my words. That flow of mental images is mind. But there is something else that we're all experiencing in this room. We are not passive exhibitors of visual or auditory or tactile images. We have selves. We have a me that is automatically present in our minds right now. We own our minds, and we have a sense that it's every one of us that is experiencing this, not the person who is sitting next to you. So in order to have a conscious mind, you have a self within the conscious mind. So a conscious mind is a mind with a self in it. The self introduces a subjective perspective in the mind, and we are only fully conscious when self comes to mind. So what we need to know to even address this mystery is, number one, how minds are put together in the brain, and number two, how selves are constructed. But what about the self? The self is really the elusive problem. And for a long time, people did not even want to touch it, and because they say, how can you have this sort of reference point, this stability that is required to maintain the continuity of selves day after day? And I thought about a solution to this problem is the following. We generate brain maps of the body's interior and use them as the reference for all other maps. So let me tell you just a little bit about how I came to this. I came to this because if you're going to have a reference that we know as self, the me, the I in our own processing, we need to have something that is stable, something that does not deviate much from day to day. Well, it so happens that we have a singular body. We have one body, not two, not three, and so that is a beginning. There is just one reference point, which is the body.
So what did he say? First he said, what is consciousness? Here he's talking about a high level of consciousness, not just being conscious of something, but being conscious of the self, conscious of the world. So here is consciousness is a mind which is a continuous flow of mental images. Now, as I explained, you think about how it connects with the teachings of the Buddha. This is continuous flow of mental images. What's happening? Panchakanda. It's really what's going on. A conscious mind is a mind with a self in it. That means it's beginning to create the notion there is a self. And the self introduces a subjective perspective in the mind. See? There is now a subjective part. And we are only fully conscious when self comes to mind. That means now the mind is aware, thinking there is a self. Being aware there is a self. And then he says there are two things we need to consider. First, how minds are put together. And secondly, how selves are constructed. Now, bear in mind these two very interesting statements. How minds are put together. What does it mean? It means mind is being put together, built up. The mind doesn't exist. It is being built up. And how selves are constructed. Self is a creation, constructed. When you construct a building, you're creating the building. So self is a creation. Creation of the mind. That's really what it is. And then he says, we generate brain maps of the body's interior and uses them as a reference point to all other maps of the world. Brain map of the body's interior. What would he be referring to? He would be referring to our sense organs. Because if you think about it, what is inside the body? You are not aware of exactly what is going on inside the stomach. You are not aware. You think you know, you can just feel only, but you don't really know. What do you know? You know what your eyes are seeing, you know what your nose is smelling, you know what your ears are hearing. So you know your sense organs are active. So this body's interior that you know, and the brain creates the map. This is your five senses. And we then use them to reference the world. That means we basically look at the world and judge the world according to our five senses. And the body becomes the reference point for the self. Very powerful statement. The body becomes the reference point to the self. That means you're now referring to the body as the self. That's what he's saying. If we look at the statements again, very importantly, here it says how minds are put together in the brain, very specifically. So basically the mind is built up, constructed. What is this construction? Sankhara. The sankhara is the process that constructs the mind, and that is the first thing that happens when one awakens from avijja. The sankhara. So this is really talking about the sankhara. It's amazing how this scientist, he is not a Buddhist, has nothing to do with Buddhism. I have not seen him associate himself with anything to do with Buddhism. And look at his statements. It is exactly describing what the Buddha has been teaching us. And then, how selves are constructed. That means the self is a creation. Created by who? Created by the mind. That's what it is. And then, the body's interior are these senses, right? The 5 physical senses plus the 6th sense of the cognition. And it is the Panchakanda that gives rise to our awareness. And then the last one, a reference point for the self. Here, personalizing the subjective experience, creating the notion that of a self in the world. So this is really what is happening. So if you look at what he has stated here, it beautifully describes exactly what the Buddha has been teaching us in the Paticca Samuppada, exactly. Right? Even though he didn't use the same words, but you can connect. So that's really amazing how a neuroscientist in his independent research, science-based research, can arrive at a conclusion that explains the Panchakanda the way Bhante teaches us. I must say to you very clearly, those of you who are aware, the way Bhante has taught us about the Panchakanda, so actually not the Panchakanda only, but the Paticca Samuppada so far, all that we have been discussing. No other teacher is explaining in this way. But based on the way Bhante has taught us, look at what the scientists are saying, exactly matching the way Bhante has been teaching us. This is the amazing thing. You know, the more I look at this, the more I'm feeling so at awe about what Bhante Punnaji has done for us. Amazing. Now I'm going to show you another video clip from the field of psychology. Before I go further, maybe just for our discussion purpose, taking a look at what has been said by the neuroscientists. Does anybody have a question? Yes, sister? Yes, point 4. No. The word conscious here, he is using the word consciousness as all scientists are using it. They refer to the word consciousness to refer to awareness of a self in the world. That's what it is. Awareness that there is a self in the world. This is what scientists use the word consciousness to mean. They do not mean consciousness means you are just sensing. No. That's why some scientists say animals are not conscious. Because they are not aware of the self in the world. They are only aware of their immediate environment and aware of their instincts. They are not aware of how they feel. They are not aware of themselves. You know. So that's why some people say, oh, animals are not conscious. The word conscious. So scientists use the word consciousness to mean a higher level of consciousness, being aware of the context, where you are and what are you relative to your environment. That means you relative to your environment. You, the self. Your environment, the world. The self in the world. So this is what scientists normally mean when they say consciousness. So that means it says a person is treated as conscious if he is aware of himself relative to his world.
But in reference to the Paticca Samuppada,
yes. Yeah. Here, you cannot use the consciousness in Paticca Samuppada and connect to here because it's a different meaning. Paticca Samuppada, if we were to say consciousness, we are only talking about mano vijnana, being conscious of the objective experience. At that point, consciousness begins. Being conscious of the objective experience, that's mano vijnana. But this is not talking about mano vijnana. This is talking one step further than that. Not only are you conscious of the objective world, you're also conscious of the arising of a self. You see, that's why they say animals are not conscious. This is why a lot of scientists, you heard a lot of scientists use the term animals are not conscious because they are not aware of the self. That's really what is meant by the word not conscious. So the word consciousness has many meanings, many levels. Right? There is also one level much higher than that, transcendental consciousness. Right? So then we're talking about being conscious, aware of worlds beyond our reach, dimensions outside our four dimensions. Being aware of other dimensions. That's a very high level of consciousness, transcendental consciousness. So we're not talking about that level. So here is at a level where the organism is aware a self exists in a world. That's really what scientists normally mean when they use the word consciousness. And for that reason, a lot of them keep saying animals are not conscious because they are not aware of a self. So here, number 4 simply means the scientist version of the meaning of the word consciousness is that there is a self. That's all he said. I hope that is clear. Whereas in the Paticca Samuppada, consciousness at the mano vijnana level is a very low level consciousness. You are conscious of the object out there, that's it. Then this one means that the mind is built up because it's been put together, being built up. And Paticca Samuppada is the mind building up with sankhara. And then the next statement, how selves are constructed. Construction is creation. So the self is created. Right? Okay, so we'll move on. So now I'm going to show you the experiment how our mind naturally likes to cling, likes to personalize. Whatever we experience, I'll give you an example. You wake up in the morning, you knock your hand against the wall and you feel pain. You say, oh, I feel pain in my hand. What's the first word in your mind? I. Right? You kick the door and then there is a sharp pain in your toe and your toe hurts. Now we say, my toe hurts. What's the first word? Mine. Everything we experience, there's always a I, me, or mine associated with that experience in our mind. We're always creating that idea that there is a self behind every experience. So now this is experiencing an object and now personalizing that object. Fake hand, it's not a real hand. So let's see that experiment first. I have 2 versions. I'll show you the deeper one, I'll show you the simple one later on.
Jonah's recreating a classic psychology experiment.
The rubber hand illusion is a funny hack of the brain where you can convince people very quickly that this rubber arm is actually their own arm.
He's setting up a stand at Venice Beach, where he'll test volunteers to see if they can experience sensations in a hand that's not theirs.
Welcome to the rubber hand experience. I want you to put your left hand right here and put your right hand right here.
Jonah has participants hide their right hand out of sight behind a divider.
Just gonna drape this so as if it's your real hand.
While he places a rubber hand on the table in front of them.
Just stare at this hand.
Jonah primes participants by brushing both the fake and real hand simultaneously, a process which helps the brain link the feeling to the fake arm.
I feel like you're doing that to my hand, but that's not my hand. My hand's over there, so that's kind of weird.
That's kind of weird.
Now that Jonah has linked this volunteer's brain to the new hand, he's got an even bigger surprise for her.
That was a little bit scary.
Good plunge.
Oh my goodness. When you hit that thing, I thought I was gonna lose my hand. So that was so scary. And it really felt like that was like I could move those fingers if I wanted to. My brain decided that I could feel that. And that you hitting that was hitting me. That's so strange how it does that.
Impressive, right? Let's see how many other people fall prey to this mind game.
My name's Jonah. Okay, so you keep on staring at that hand.
That was crazy. That was crazy.
Okay.
Oh wow, that scared me.
That scared you?
Although around 10% of the participants weren't able to mentally connect the fake hand to their body,
Did it feel like I smashed your hand at all? No.
No.
most felt some kind of phantom sensation, if not actual pain. Jonah is hacking into these people's mental body maps,
Oh my God.
causing them to connect information inaccurately.
Right.
So that is upadana. Upa-adana. That's why the A has a dash on top, because it appears at the end of the upa and at the beginning of the dana. Upa-adana. Bringing in, taking in within oneself, personalizing. So personalization of the body as the self, this is the Satkaya Ditthi. How does that work? First, this personalizing the reactions to objective experience. Oh, I don't like it, right? So that I arises. First, there is a reaction to the objective, and there is a notion that somebody, that I, is reacting to it. And next, looking for stability. The concept, the stability of the concept. We cannot deal with unstable concepts. The mind realizing that that mind is experiencing something, that experience is unstable. It arises and disappears, arises and disappears. It needs something more stable to hang on to. And so looking for stability, and that's when it begins to seek stability, and it finds the body to be the stable part, the physically stable one. So conceiving, creating the concept that the body is the self, that atta, existing in a world, loka. So the first thing is personalizing the reaction as mind, right? And now looking for stability, and the I must exist, and then discovering that there is a body. So now beginning to connect that the body is the thing that exists, the body therefore is the self. This is really what's going on in our mind constantly, and that's why we created the notion of a self. So existence means there is. Now what we have done so far is to explain the space part, dimensions of the body. Now there is a past and a present and a future. So now with the body, we begin to see the past of the self is the birth of the body. The present of the self is the aging of the body. And the future of the self is the death of the body. So we link birth, aging and death as the process of the self. So when birth, aging and death comes, with birth, aging and death comes a whole mass of suffering.
So the body has become the self. The body has become the self. So once the body has become the self, it has the past, present and future. What is the past of the body? Birth. Birth is the past of the body. What is the future of the body? Death. Death is the future of the body. And in between birth and death is what we call aging. So you see, now you are not only having a body, you are not only having a self, you are also having birth, old age and death. With the coming of birth, old age and death, what happens? Grief, lamentation, pain, sorrow and despair. By creating a self, you have created suffering.
So by creating the self, we have created suffering. So now birth is the past of the body, aging is the present of the body, and death is the future of the body. And this is the part which is the insecurity of life, dukkha. And with that comes all this. I didn't update it on the screen, but I updated it on the notes. At the top there, you will notice I changed dukkha to stress, domanassa to distress. Stress generally refers to physical suffering. Right? Stress is hormones being released, causing all kinds of tensions in the body. So there's a physical suffering. So in this sense, these 5 stages of dukkha, or 5 stages of suffering, dukkha here means physical suffering. And distress means mental suffering. Domanassa normally refers to the mind being disturbed, the mind being agitated, restless, and that is domanassa. So those are the only thing I changed. So basically this is completes the picture. Now I'll show you the flow chart of that process. Earlier on we dealt with the point that we reach a point, we are now experiencing pleasant, unpleasant experiences, and we begin to react with tanha, the 3 kinds of reaction. With that, we begin to want to do something, and that is volition, cetana. Wanting to do something, and that wanting is lobha, dosa or moha. That is lust and greed for something that is pleasant, avoiding aversion and hatred for something that is unpleasant, and at the same time the delusion of a self-centered existence. And with that, we then take action. Whether we do it physically or not do it physically, we take action. And that is karma. 3 things go together. Cetana, karma, and the results, vipaka. These 3 things always go together. Where there is cetana, there is karma. Where there is karma, there is vipaka. Vipaka is the consequence. And the consequence is the outcome that can hurt you or come back to haunt you, either immediately or later on, or at the end of your life, or in your future life. There is no specification when it will happen, but it will happen at some point in life. Right? So basically vipaka will come back to haunt you one way or another and lead you to be reborn over and over again. Welcome back to samsara. So that's really what this whole process of Paticca Samuppada originally was meant to be. To explain how the mind constructed from a state of insentience, non-consciousness, waking up and constructing it. The Buddha actually experienced that. And from that experience, he gained that ultimate knowledge. So this is the awakening at a very more advanced level of awakening. So in a way, you could say there are 2 kinds of Buddha in that sense. Those who awaken through this process have attained a very high level beyond what the normal Arahant has accomplished. And there has been commentaries that those who have attained this level or even have experienced ayatanas can cultivate psychic power. But BHANTE Punnaji never likes to talk about psychic power. So we're not going to talk about that. But generally, it is believed that Moggalianas is one who actually became enlightened through this process. That's why he has psychic power. And many Arahants don't have psychic power because they were enlightened by Paticca Vimutti. To sum it all up, the last part, birth and existence. Very interesting because very often this is what we think. We are born. That's why we exist. Right? A lot of people think like that. I exist because I am born. There is this body, I'm born, so I exist. That is not correct. Because in the Paticca Samuppada, you will realize it's the other way around. And Bhante explains it.
When we are born, do you know why we are born? You don't know why you are born. No one has been telling you why you were born, or even how you were born. This is why a philosopher called Kierkegaard was asking, how did I come into existence? I was never told about this. Why am I here? Who gave permission for me to come up like this? And then he was talking about how everyone is struggling and unhappy. So the important thing is, here it was the Buddha who found this and explained. So we first think of what is going on. That means we have been born. We are born, we grow old, fall sick and die. And what is the cause of birth? Why are we born? Now the important thing is that we think we have come into existence, and how did we come into existence? Because we were born. But here the Buddha is pointing out we didn't come into existence because we were born. This is an interesting thing. We were born because we have come into existence. Normally people think that we have come into existence because we were born. Here the Buddha points out that we were born because we have come into existence. Bhavapacca jati. Not jatipacca bhava. This is the interesting thing. Then the problem comes up. How did we come into existence? This is the interesting thing. How did we come into existence? There the Buddha points out, upadana pacca bhava. Upadana means personalizing. Upadana means to take inside. By personalizing, we have come into existence.
So if you look at the diagram, you can see that Bhava first, then only Jati. Bhava, Pachaya, Jati. Pachaya simply means the conditions that lead to the next outcome. So it's because we think we exist. The mind has now created the notion that the self exists. So we are reborn over and over again. If the mind stops thinking that there is a self that exists, that means the mind is so pure that it is now a selfless mind, then there is no rebirth. But we cannot attain that, because attaining that is really attaining the stage where we have reached that Paticca Vimutti. Right? Then you become liberated, you will not be reborn again. So the mind creates the notion of existence because of upadana. That is personalizing our experiences. And upadana arises because of our reaction, tanha. So you could basically say the root cause of all suffering is because we are born into the suffering. And we are born into the suffering because the mind thinks we exist. So we are continuously being reborn over and over in samsara. And this thinking we exist arises because of the personalizing mind, upadana, and also the reaction to everything we experience, the tanha. So basically tanha and upadana are the root cause of eventually leading to all the suffering in the world. Right? So Bhante has been teaching us, if we can tame our emotional reaction and prevent the tanha from happening, then we can bring peace of mind and we can become emancipated. So in other words, the secret to enlightenment is to train the mind to the point that it does not react to whatever is being experienced. No tanha. Where there is no tanha, there is no upadana. Without upadana, there is no bhava, then you will not be reborn. Simple as that. Simple, but not easy. Simple in theory, but not easy to practice. But that's really the secret behind it, the selflessness. And this is why it has been said, if you cultivate metta, with metta and karuna, you can also find your way to enlightenment through metta. Because cultivating metta leads the mind to be so pure, it is free of the notion of a self. Without the notion of a self, whatever happens, you don't say, I like it, I don't like it, there is no I to like or don't like, then there is no reaction. So the path to enlightenment through the Brahma Vihara is to cultivate metta so perfectly that it is pure. That means you are practicing pure benevolence, universal benevolence and compassion. And that is another path to enlightenment. So when the Buddha became enlightened and he saw all this, then he woke up in the conventional world, and then he sat under the Bodhi Tree, and then he became Anuttara Samma Sambuddha, awakened from the dream of existence. And then he uttered these verses. Now, these verses are not found anywhere in the Dhammapada or sutras. They are mentioned in the commentary because there was some comments that Ananda was the one who repeated what the Buddha said to him. And this is BHANTE Punnaji's translation. Normally this translation is talking about the house builder, right? Looking for the house builder, right? And all that. But BHANTE says it's not the house builder, it's the creator of the world. So BHANTE translated as, through innumerable lives in this vortex of rebirth, did I seek the creator of this grief-ridden world. So the house is the world. The builder is the creator. So that's what but they said the Buddha really meant looking for the creator of the world. House builder. Never did I find this creator unknown. It is painful to be born again and again. So this first part apparently was not written anywhere, but in the commentaries it was mentioned that Ananda had explained that to someone, and then it was somehow put down in writing, and that's how it passed on. And then the second part. O Creator, I have seen you. You will never create again. Your structure is dismantled, the foundation is destroyed, the mind has stopped creating, the emotional urge has ceased. So here it is referring to the Buddha having now awakened from it. That the Buddha now realizes who is the creator. And know that the creator will never create again. Structure is dismantled, foundation is destroyed. These are the defilements. Defilements are now purified. The mind has stopped creating emotional urge. Emotional urge is tanha. Tanha no longer reacts. That's really what the Buddha uttered. And there is a commentary written by Venerable Buddha Sarada. You can download the commentary. And it is at that link there, tiny.cc/housebuilder. The popular translation is looking for the builder of the house. But what Bhante explained is simply looking for the creator of the world. The house is the world. Creator of the world. Actually, the house, Bhante at one point also said that the house was also referring to the mind, because the world is not the thing that is out there. The world is the world that is created in the mind, the objective experience. So it is really the mind that creates everything. That's why Dhammapada verse number 1, Mano Pubangama Dhamma, is the mind that actually can change everything. So this is very interesting. So this is really what happened when the Buddha became enlightened. And this is the end of my sharing. You can download it from tiny.cc/review06. Thank you very much for coming. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.